Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Road to Perdition writer Max Allan Collins, brings you the immersive, fully immersive audio drama, True Noir. From the Nathan Heller casebooks, starring Todd Stashwick as Nathan Heller, once a bent Chicago PD officer turned private eye to the stars. A 19-novel series that spans from the 1930s to the late 1960s. A fully immersive audio drama, 10 episodes, written entirely by Max Allan Collins, coming to a crowdfunding campaign. Almost, well, soon, near you. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and fantasy and cinema and whatever, your evangelist of the imagination and the as-yet-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. I'm, of course, Robcasting at you from the Robservatory, leaking at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 955. I don't drive 55. Van Hagar or Van Halen, put your comments down below. I mean, I'm hot for teacher still as a mid-50s guy. Oh, wait, what? Anyway, This is a very interesting story that came to my attention that I thought I would talk about, that is a product of our modern age. I always say on this channel, when you're working in the entertainment business, you don't get what you deserve. Probably any business, but it's especially true of Hollywood. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. But the thing is, you can only negotiate things that are on the table. What happens when there's things you should have negotiated that never even existed at the time you got the job? Well, we live in a world that way. We live in a sci-fi world where things have changed. And we're going to go back and we're going to talk about the comic book industry, the funny books, the funny papers, as they called them, if you think about people that like newspaper comics, like Max Allan Collins. Max Allan Collins has probably the single most impressive collection of newspaper comic strips I have ever seen in one place. You could actually set up a building, the Max Allan Collins Comic Strip History Museum. I mean, the man, his collection is chef's kiss, amazing. An art form that not a lot of people remember, but Max is the man. That's one of the great reasons I want to work with him, because he is the man. He's not just a great writer, but he is an imagination connoisseur par excellence. And he married well, too. He married a bombshell, blonde pinup girl. I mean, he's living the dream, and he has been for decades. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just happy to be working with him, and I can't wait for you to see what we have wrought with True Noir. Very exciting. But, so when writers and artists were contracted by DC and Marvel or the other comics companies that worked, to keep it simple, let's talk about Marvel and DC. So what happens is when you were hired by them to work in the Marvel bullpen or work for DC, you were what is known as work for hire. So say you're a writer or an artist, you're hired by one of these comic companies, you come in and whatever you create while you're under their umbrella, they own it. So you could create 100 characters, but they own them. But that was because you understood when you were hired that you were working for a comic book company, and the comic book company was they were making comic books. And at the time, there was not a lot of, other than there was a Superman serial, a Batman TV show. There were hundreds, thousands of other comic characters created, and none of them ever made it to television or the silver screen. So the idea was, if you were working for a comics company, you were creating characters that they would own, but the idea that they would ever be translated into another medium was science fiction. So no one ever thought to negotiate that into their contracts because it wasn't a reality at the time. Nowadays, if you were, let's say you wrote, if Hollywood ever made spec screenplays anymore, let's say you wrote a speculative screenplay, created your own original characters, and it was amazing, and people finally came, you won the blacklist, and somebody came knocking on your door, and all of your characters you wrote like the next great fantasy epic, and Warner Brothers or 20th Century Studios, Steve Asbell at 20th Century Studios called you up and said, this is the best script I've ever read. And he knows he's a story guy and said, 20th Century wants to make it. If you go in and you suddenly begin with your people, you have your lawyer and your agent, and you start negotiating your deal, part of that deal would talk about sequels, television spin-offs, novels, all of the ways it could be spun off and have other revenue streams or other places where your characters could be translated in to tell stories, animation, audio, dramas, whatever it was, it would be pre-negotiated into the price of whatever they were going to pay you for your work. Nowadays, it's all covered in perpetuity throughout the universe because they know better. I mean, hell, there was a reason why in 1982 the music on the home video versions of Fast Times at Ridgemont High and John Carpenter's The Thing had to be changed because when they were making the movies, they didn't think about the music rights for home video. Why do you think Miami Vice took so long to come on to video, Blu-ray? No one thought about the music rights. It's a whole different thing. Of course, they got to get paid too. You know what I mean? It's very lucrative. Nowadays, we think about those things. But back in the day, people didn't. When Blade came out, Stephen Norrington's Blade, the first Blade movie with Wesley Snipes as the Daywalker. Marv Wolfman created Blade while he worked for Marvel Comics. He was a work-for-hire employee. But he created that character. Now, if you're Tom fucking Clancy and you've written Hunt for Red October, you've created Jack Ryan. You know, you didn't create it work for hire. You made that shit up. And when Paramount rolls, when Mace Neufeld shows up and says, hey, yo, I want to option your book, go make it at Paramount. I mean, he's no longer with us. But Tom Clancy is like, I own that character. I created that character. That character is mine. You have to pay. But when you work for a comics company creating Blade for the 4-color fantasy pages of Marvel comic, you didn't think to yourself that, oh, wait, in the late 1990s, New Line Cinema was going to use Blade as the basis for a new franchise. 3 movies, a TV show, animation, maybe a Mahershala Ali film at Disney Marvel. Now, who knows? But when Marv Wolfman created this character, when he signed up at work for hire at Marvel, there was no idea that Blade was ever going to be a movie character. So, when the movie comes out, Marv Wolfman mixes it up, legally says, hey, you know what? This was not on the table. I created this character. It's my character. I need to benefit from this. Now, some people could say, legally, you could say, well, you know, at the time when you were a work-for-hire employee for Marvel, we own everything. Yeah, of course, but that's because this different medium it was not in the offing. And people could say, a lot of people could argue, well, you weren't anticipating what the future might behold or bring to you. Well, no, still, it doesn't matter. You created it, and they're benefiting off it. And they're benefiting off it in a way that also didn't exist when you created the character. So, I believe personally that nowadays it's in perpetuity throughout the universe. They're anticipating any other because they were smart. But back at the day, nobody would have ever thought when Blade was created, when Marv Wolfman was writing things like Tomb of Dracula or whatever, no one would have ever thought that Blade the Daywalker would become a movie. No one, I'm telling you, just no one knew. So there was no way. How do you make a legal, like you can't negotiate something that might not ever happen. However, they do that in now Hollywood scripts all the time. You actually, deals have been thwarted because you're arguing over a television spinoff that might never happen. It's fucking crazy. I personally have tried to negotiate deals for movies that I was going to make that fell apart because we're negotiating on the if come. Like maybe one day this might happen at some point, but I don't want to pay you that much money about something that doesn't even exist yet. Let's make the one thing I've always believed. Protect yourself, sure. Protect yourself, absolutely. But what you got to do is you have to make that first thing. You know, I'm going to give it up since we're talking comics. Todd McFarlane. When all the creators went to Image, they created Image. Todd McFarlane, of all of those creators, and I love them all, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Jim Valentino, take your pick, whoever you want to talk about, Mark Silvestri. Todd McFarlane was like, okay, I'm going to put out Spawn. I'm going to put out my book Spawn every month. It's coming out on time. Before he spun off and did toy companies and did all this other stuff, he concentrated on getting his book out every month. That was the basis of his empire. He's had ups and downs. He made Neil Gaiman wrote Angel. Didn't pay well. Let's not get into that. But the idea was nose the grindstone, put out Spawn on time. Well done, Todd. He's still here, banging them out. Spawn's still a thing. Over 30 years later, I would say that 2024 is I remember when Comic-Con broke. It was 1994. That's when Rob Liefeld brought the Youngblood spaceship, which, by the way, the funniest story I ever heard at Comic-Con was him telling me at the Playboy party, he told me and Adrian Biddle the story of making that spaceship. One of the funniest things ever. I love Rob Liefeld. He also does a show called Robservations. Shout out to you, Rob. Anyway, but what happens if you create a character and 30 years later they turn it into a movie? A lot of money to be had there. People are getting paid. You're making there's more money than any comic book creator ever dreamed of. That's still true today. Which brings me to the story of the creation of Wolverine. Everyone's favorite Canuck. Now, nowadays, I need to talk about the three people that are involved in this particular story. One, Len Wein, co-creator of Swamp Thing, person that I knew, married to a lawyer named Christine Vallada. Christine's put me on many a panel because of Christine Vallada. Once at the UCLA Festival of Books, I was on a panel with Neil fucking Gaiman. Christine Vallada was Len's lovely wife. Now Len's lovely widow. Love Christine, delightful woman. Len left us too early in 2017. But Len Wein co-created Wolverine. And if you look up Len Wein's creations and his career in the comic industry, unimpeachable. Not only was he a stellar human being and a very nice man, he was incredibly creative and prolific. He edited Watchmen. The man is amazing. Amazing. Now, there's another gentleman that I also quite enjoyed. Now, let me, so you got Len Wein on one hand, co-creator of Wolverine. Then you have Roy Thomas, another comic legend. Roy Thomas succeeded the great Stan Lee as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. And this is where this begins. Let me read a little bit about Roy Thomas, who he was. I'm going to read the Wikipedia entry. Roy William Thomas, who was born November 22nd, 1940, meaning he's 83 years old now, is an American comic writer and editor. He was Stan Lee's first successor as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics and possibly best known for introducing the pulp magazine hero Conan the Barbarian to American comics. Thomas is also known for his championing of the Golden Age comic book heroes, particularly the 1940s superhero team, the Justice Society of America, and for lengthy writing stints on Marvel's X-Men and the Avengers and DC Comics All-Star Squadron, among other titles. Among the comic characters he co-created, now this is interesting, Vision, Doc Samson, Carol Danvers, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Ultron, Yellow Jacket, Defenders, Man-Thing, Red Sonja, Morbius, Ghost Rider, Squadron Supreme, Invaders, Black Knight, Dane Whitman, Nighthawk, Havoc, Banshee, Sunfire, Tundra, Akron, Killraven, Wendell Vaughn, Red Wolf, Red Guardian, Diamond Hellstrom, and Valkyrie. Roy Thomas was inducted into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame in 2011 and into the Harvey Awards Hall of Fame in 2022. While Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief of Marvel, succeeding Stan Lee, was the time when Wolverine was created. Herb Trimpe, Len Wein. Now, Roy Thomas is claiming that he co-created the character of Wolverine. Now, normally, comic books, who would care? But as we all know, comic book characters are the co-creation of them after Marv Wolfman took offense and they actually gave him credit on the home video version of Blade, just like Harlan Ellison claimed credit, and all these writers, and they're not claiming credit because they didn't create a character. They're claiming credit because they did, and everyone else is getting paid but them. I am a huge fan of characters getting paid. And like I always say, you do not get what you deserve in Hollywood. You get what you negotiate, but you can't negotiate something that doesn't yet exist. That's why now it's throughout the universe in perpetuity. People know better. But, one of my favorite comic creators, Jim Starlin, Vanth Dreadstar, The Metamorphosis Odyssey. Jim Starlin created Thanos. That's right. Do you know who is in Endgame? It's a small role. Jim Starlin is in the therapy session with Steve Rogers, with, Captain America. Jim Starlin is there. Marvel knows. If you watch a Marvel movie, if you watch an MCU film, all the comic creators that were involved in the creation of the character in whatever iteration, they're in the end credits of MCU movies. I would assume that they get paid, probably not a lot, but they get something. You get a $50,000 check or some shit like that on a movie that makes $3 billion. That's pretty fucking good. So Marvel, the MCU, Kevin Feige, the people over there, been pretty good. Len Wein, creator of Wolverine, appears in an X-Men movie. I believe it was Days of Future Past. Len Wein's in the film. Gets to be in it. Gets to be a senator. Come on. Because people know. Get a little cheddar. We have a third Wolverine movie coming out this year. Actually, no, we don't have a third Wolverine movie. We have a fourth Wolverine movie and a third Deadpool movie. They're the same movie. Deadpool and Wolverine. Len Wein created Deadpool. However, Roy Thomas, the former editor-in-chief of Marvel, is now after Stan Lee is gone, after Len is gone, after Herb Trimpe is gone, he's still alive. He's still kicking. He is now taking credit for co-creating Wolverine. Now, 5 years ago, he didn't. 10 years ago, he didn't. 20 years ago, he didn't. Roy Thomas has never ever said that he co-created Wolverine. But he is now. And apparently, Christine Vallada, Len Wein's widow, was called by Marvel that in the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine movie, it is going to say in the credits that Roy Thomas co-created Wolverine. No, he did not. See, here's the thing. At the time Wolverine was created in the mid-70s for The Incredible Hulk, Roy Thomas was the editor-in-chief of Marvel. Now, what does an editor do? Editors offer suggestions. They tell their creators, perhaps try this, maybe try this. What if you did this? But they're the editor. They're not the creator. That's not how it works. That's not how editors... Stephen King's... When Kirby McCauley was editing Stephen King's novels, he wasn't going, I co-created Stephen King's books. Stephen King wouldn't be the writer he is without me. They don't do that. An editor edits. Doesn't get co-creation credit. And Roy Thomas, I read about Roy Thomas. I read, you know where he's at. You know where he's coming from. He has plenty of characters he co-created. Has a whole... But you know what? When he was editor-in-chief, Wolverine was created. Now Wolverine's making some fucking cash. And everyone else who created Wolverine is no longer with us. So why not you swoop in and get some, extra cheddar for your family if you can. And apparently Marvel's allowing him to do it. That's bullshit. Bullshit, but again, remember, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And if you're alive, you can negotiate, and especially if creators are dead, they can't speak for themselves. So let's jump into why did I decide to cover this particular story? Well, first of all, it was brought to my attention because Bobby Chase had a post on Christine Vallada on Facebook. We are friends. Posted something. Now, who is Bobby Chase? Bobby Chase, first of all, Barbara Chase. She's a woman, and she also has been an editor. Let me read according to her Wikipedia entry. Who is Bobby Chase? Barbara Bobby Chase is an American editor and writer in the comic book industry. She worked for Marvel Comics throughout the 1980s and 1990s. In 1994 and 95, she was one of Marvel Group Editors-in-Chief, the highest level a female editor has ever achieved at the company. She was Vice President of Talent Development at DC Comics from 2015 to 2020. As an editor, she's helped launch the careers of such creators as Salvador LaRocca and Jamal, I think it's Ingley, and worked closely with writer Peter David on his acclaimed run on The Incredible Hulk, which, by the way, The Fixer in Vegas. Come on, Peter David's run on the Hulk is the best. She also edited significant runs on the Marvel Comics titles G.I. Joe, Captain America, Iron Man, Sensational She-Hulk, Thor, Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider, X-Force, Doctor Strange, Spirits of Vengeance, Morbius, Night Stalkers, Darkhold, Pages in the Book of Sins, Blade, Elektra, Alpha Flight, and the Marvel Paramount Comics Star Trek line, including brand new properties Starfleet Academy and Star Trek Early Voyages. which surprisingly, Early Voyages, I can tell you, is way better than Strange New Worlds. And there you go, Starfleet Academy. I mean, if you didn't already believe that modern Star Trek was already bankrupt, Marvel Comics and Paramount did a Starfleet Academy series and a Captain Pike series back in the 90s. Just saying. For DC Comics, she's edited titles such as Batgirl, Nightwing, Teen Titans, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Birds of Prey, and Green Arrow. Bobby Chase began working for Marvel in 1985 when she was hired as an assistant editor of Marvel's Special Projects Department. She then went on to do work as a freelance writer and designer. In 1986, she was promoted to editor. She had a lengthy run as editor of Marvel's line of G.I. Joe comics, including the flagship title G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, written by Larry Hama. I'm just throwing that in. In 1988, she took over the editorial reins of The Incredible Hulk, editing that title for 10 years. Where did Wolverine first appear? The Incredible Hulk. Just saying. In 1989, while editing John Byrne's The Sensational She-Hulk series, she came into conflict with the creator, and he was ultimately fired from the series. In 1990, she edited the Steeltown Rockers Limited series, and during her time at Marvel, Bobby Chase was cited in the company's Bullpen Bulletin news and information page as both battling Bobby Chase and breathtaking Bobby Chase. Because of her tenure on Marvel's G.I. Joe comics in early 1991, Chase worked with Hasbro and Impel Marketing on developing the first sets of G.I. Joe trading cards. Let's just say Bobby Chase is, as we like to say in the industry, a baller. She was a shot caller. Well, Bobby Chase published something on Facebook. And that's why I'm doing this show right now. Because I've been reading comics in the 80s when I came back into comics because of, as you know, why? Say it with me now, Camelot 3000, number 4. Mike W. Barr. Brian Bolland. Oh my God, I was like, this is a comic book? Baxter Paper? Brought me back to Golden Age collectibles and time travelers in downtown Seattle. Anyway, so 18 hours ago, Bobby Chase posted this. Who created Wolverine? I'm sure a lot of you can answer that question in seconds. It was co-created by writer Len Wein and artist John Romita Sr. Jr. Sr. designed the original costume and thinks he came up with the retractable claws. Then artist Herb Trimpe brought the character to life, starting in Incredible Hulk 1980 from 1974, right? Bobby goes on, not so fast. Just this month, things have changed. Recently, my friend and Len Wein's widow, Christine Vallada, got a call from Marvel executive David Bogart, informing her that in the upcoming Wolverine and Deadpool movie coming out this July, Roy Thomas will now be credited as the co-creator of Wolverine with Len Wein and John Romita Sr. And David said it's a done deal. Now keep in mind, we had X-Men 1, X-Men 2, X3, Days of Future Past, X-Men First Class, X-Men Wolverine's Origin, or X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, Logan, X-Men Apocalypse, all those movies. Roy Thomas's name is not in them. Deadpool 1 and 2, they talk about Wolverine. I don't know if there's... But anyway, Christine Vallada, Len Wein's widow, who's a lawyer, gets a call saying, yeah, in this new Wolverine movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, Roy Thomas is now going to get co-credit for creating Wolverine, which hasn't been the case for 50 years. 50 years. Everyone knew who created Wolverine. Apparently not now. Not anymore. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. And the MCU, leave it to the fucking MCU. Gosh, that I loved for so long. 15 years almost. They did bangers. The entire Infinity Saga. Kevin Feige, I said on so many YouTube streams, our Lord and Savior of the comic book movie, Kevin Feige, who I love, his love for Next Generation is well known. He loves Star Trek, even like Free Enterprise. I love Kevin Feige. But this should not stand. This is some fucking bullshit right here. All right, let's go on. So, David Bogart, what a name. You're going to Bogart the creation of Wolverine, kind of probably like the joint you smoked in high school. David Bogart probably had a reputation. Don't let Bogart get the J, because he will Bogart the dank nugs. I don't know David Bogart. I'm just saying his last name is Bogart. And I'm not talking Humphrey. I'm talking about a guy who steals shit from you, smokes way too much of it. Anyway. Roy Thomas will now be credited as the co-creator with Len Wein and John Romita Sr., and David said it's a done deal. I was standing in Christine's kitchen. This is Bobby Chase. I was standing in Christine's kitchen this past Sunday as she told me about the phone call. Of course, Christine is seriously concerned about her husband Len's legacy. Len was profoundly important to the comic book industry, and that legacy is being changed for the worse 6 years after his death. Len cannot speak for himself. Neither can John Romita Sr. So I did some digging, along with the help of husband Craig and our friend Car D'Angelo. First, some facts about 4 old friends I've worked with or for them all. Len Wein died September 10th, 2017. Herb Trimpe died April 13th, 2015. Stan Lee died November 12th, 2018. John Romita Sr. died June 12th, 2023. Roy Thomas died... Oh, just kidding. He's fine, people. Carr pointed out that Roy and his manager, John Cimino, submitted a piece to the Comic Buyer's Resource, or Comic Book Resource, for their online publication, which they published on February 9th, 2019. It looks like the article submitted to CBR was a piece JC wrote on his blog in early 2018, only a few months after Len died. It's entitled, Weapon X Explained. Wolverine co-creator reveals the truth behind his origin. It might be worth noting this was done 4 years after Herb died, 2 years after Len died, and 3 months after Stan Lee died. In this piece, Roy finally uncovers the real story of Wolverine's origin, in which he says he co-created the character. As Roy says in the article, he suggested the name and asked that the character be Canadian. But is that creatorship? Remember, he was the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. It was his job as editor to throw out ideas that then the creators could take and run with. Carr said he spoke with Christine about the article when it came out, but she wasn't concerned. At the time, she was grieving because her beloved husband Len had passed away. Even if Roy could have contributed as much to the character as Len, should he get the credit? Does contributing a name and a country of origin mean he deserves a percentage of the creator equity when he was on staff at the company? Does Marvel now deserve a split, as they would then be co-creators, having hired the editor, now taking credit? Marvel is the character's owner in this particular case, and in most cases, 100%. Character equity in no way implies that creators own any part of a character. At the time of Wolverine's creation in 1974, Roy Thomas was then editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. A role I once, this is Bobby Chase writing this again, a role I once held, although not quite so significantly, Roy was only the second editor-in-chief Marvel ever had, having taken over for Stan the Man himself. So one might say it was in his capacity as an editor that he suggested to writer Len the name Wolverine, and then spectated as Len created the character description, the backstory, powers, speaking, mannerisms, and, along with artist John Romita Jr., created his look. Then my old pal Herb Trimpe brought Wolverine to life, with body language and physical mannerisms starting in Hulk 180. I'm not at all implying Roy didn't contribute to Wolverine's creation, although we'll never know how greatly he deserved it, especially when this article in CBR was published a little over a year after Len's death. Does Roy, having done all of this as editor-in-chief, have any contractual claim to the character, or just bragging rights? Had I been involved in the same way with the creation of any characters back in my days as either editor or EIC, it would most certainly have not netted me any credit, nor would I have wanted any. Working with creators is part of the job of being a Marvel employee. It's not like these characters are being co-created by Roy. It's like they're being created by Marvel. Car D'Angelo said as we were digging incredulously through doctored entire entries across Wikipedia and more. Because remember, anybody can contribute to Wikipedia. So there's lots of people who are constantly going in and re-editing things, changing them, whether they're true or not, which is why the internet is not like history. Well, I guess it is like history. You can just change it. To the victors go the spoils, right? Also from Car D'Angelo, there's another piece that is interesting because it points out that Roy's contribution of nationality had already been pitched by a fan in Foom, Marvel's fan magazine, Friends of Old Marvel. And Dave Cockrum have claims that his character presentation's designs that led to the new X-Men included a Wolverine character. Always presumed to be based on some of his Legion ideas, such as the new costume he planned for Timberwolf, which he did get Wolverine into for his last issue, 107, with the Legion of Superheroes-inspired Imperial Guard. Now, we're going to character before that, and I told you about it. Roy Thomas says it very well could have been. On the other hand, I don't have a conscious memory of his doing that. And of course, it doesn't take much brains for either of us to come up with a name like Wolverine anyway. Animal characters are a big thing. I'm told one of the designs he showed me was for a guy he called the Wolverine, though if so, I don't feel it had any influence on my conceiving a Marvel character of that name a bit later, since I'd been intrigued by animals since childhood and was as knowledgeable as Dave about what a Wolverine was. Once again, Thomas makes sure that we know he was this close to becoming a veterinarian. He'd been intrigued by animals since childhood, damn you. While Thomas undoubtedly gave the directive towards creating a Canadian character with the name and elements that a young reader gave us less than a year ago to Len Wein, it is truly Wein who shaped that character up into the marketable character we know today. And we know this often by Roy Thomas's own account. I brought it to Len, and it worked out very well. He was about to do some stuff that would take Hulk to Canada. That ended up being that Wendigo story. I want a character called Wolverine who's short and Canadian. I like the way Len did accents. It's a collection of different things. It starts with Roy. Actually, no, it doesn't. It starts with Brother Voodoo, which was set in the Caribbean, which I love writing. I love writing accents. I would write the accents in. Roy calls me in. Look, I've been reading Brother Voodoo and I hate you. I just can't write accents. I've never been able to do this, and I really admire your ability to write accents. I would love you to write a Canadian accent about... that's not in there. I'm putting that in myself. So I have a name, Wolverine, and give me a Canadian character. Len Wein in 2014 said this, simplifying the story for a comic book panel audience. After that, John Romita was asked to design the character, and I don't think either Len or I had much input on that. I just turned it over to Len, and I never thought about it again. I kind of vaguely proofed the story when it came in, but otherwise, it was just another character. So now we had a Canadian character, and we made a couple of ads in the book, plugging the fact that we had the first Canadian superhero in the United States. Other than that, I left it to Len, who did a great job. And then, of course, it really took off a couple of years later when Len decided to put him in the X-Men right after I had left my role as editor-in-chief. Roy Thomas said that in 2021. Actually, the name Wolverine was Roy's suggestion. He suggested do a character called Wolverine, gave him to me to create, and most of the rest of the details as to who and what he was were my own. Len Wein said that in 1982. It was Len who came up with the idea of making Wolverine a mutant, and his claws made out of adamantium, which I like naturally since I'd invented that material. John Romita designed the look and costume pretty much independent of Len and me, but certainly Len did a great job. I knew he would. That's why I had him do the first story rather than someone else. At any rate, in the long run, the most important writer of Wolverine was Chris Claremont, not Len or me, but we were the first. Roy Thomas said that in 2018. Well, Len Wein created Wolverine, said Dave Cockrum in 1982. It's notable to me that Wein often spoke of himself as the main creator of Wolverine, and Thomas had nothing to say to counter it during Len Wein's lifetime. More on that soon. But for Thomas, a prolific whiner whenever he feels wronged, the fact that he never challenged Wein on this or ever took credit for co-creating Wolverine until just a few years ago really does need to be recognized. This is a recent development, stemming purely from the retconning of Thomas's career as Stan Lee's lackey and Golden Age enthusiast to somehow being the other part that generated the Marvel Universe. It is transparent as it is pathetic. Now, I just want to say, I'm not saying it's as transparent as it is pathetic, even though I might agree with it, and I'm a Roy Thomas fan. I'm reading the article, fourcolorsinners.com, which is, again, linked in the description. By the way, here's a great picture of Len Wein and Hugh Jackman. When I first created Wolverine, I created him as a Canadian mutant specifically so that whoever ended up with the assignment of writing the new X-Men book, should it ever occur, would have a Canadian mutant handy if he wanted him. Len Wein, 2013. That was entirely Len's idea. I think he mentions adamantium at the very beginning of the first story, doesn't he? The claws were Romita's contribution. Roy Thomas said that in 2021. I created Wolverine, I created Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Thunderbird, said Len Wein in 2008. Andy Olson sends in a very distinctive character submission. Thomas sees it and takes those elements and gives it to Wein with the instruction that the character's Canadian. Thomas contributes absolutely nothing else. It would have been exactly the same character. He would have looked the same because Romita would have drawn him. He would have been Canadian. He would have been short. He would have been called Wolverine, and he'd have been mean. But other than that, it would have been a different story, and he probably would have had different powers. The claws wouldn't have necessarily been adamantium. He would have been a different character, says Roy Thomas in 2021. And suddenly I thought, hey, I'm the guy that had the original idea for Wolverine, and I haven't written the character that much, said Roy Thomas in 2021. So in Len Wein's lifetime, Wein passed away in 2017, there is no public debate over who was the primary composer, if you will, for Wolverine. The rise of Thomas as a significant force is a relatively new development, as I've stated. This is the author. Therefore, I was very surprised, though I shouldn't be, to stumble upon some truly disgusting comments made a few years ago while researching this story. Those comments are made by lifelong failure and obnoxious man-child John Migo Stretch Cimino, and they were made on YouTube videos featuring Len Wein. Until today, preparing this article, I was completely unaware of them. Perhaps there are numerous such videos that Cimino passionately comments on the movement to properly defend his liege, Roy Thomas. Now, I'm not going to get into those because this article goes on and on and on. It is a long article, but you get the idea. And if you want to read the whole thing, please, I implore all of you, find that link in the description. It's there. Read it. The real thing is, it is a story as old as time. If there is money to be had, and when you have a company like Marvel who is doling out credit, and God bless them, because they learned their lesson from the great Marv Wolfman. And I got to say, first of all, shout out to Marv Wolfman. I've always loved Marv Wolfman. I think my favorite, I've said this before, I grew up loving the Justice League of America. My mom used to buy me the individual issues, starting at about issue like 95. That was my young era. But my first two comic loves in terms of super teams were the New Teen Titans and, of course, X-Men. Around the same time, there's the great team-up comic where Dark Phoenix and Darkseid team up. But Chris Claremont, and especially Marv Wolfman, who I actually went to Jerry's Deli with once, he signed my Crisis on Infinite Earths graffiti designs hardcover. I've got the absolute version. I also have the big box set. You can flip it down and get all the... It's right there, all the hardcovers. I love Marv Wolfman. Love the guy. Shout out to his wife, Noelle, and all that. He's great. And the New Teen Titans, I love that comic. No one's ever been able to. To me, that would be the ultimate. The Titans TV series didn't quite, to me, if you want to make the best comic book series ever out of New Teen Titans, you know what you have to look at? The TV series Friday Night Lights. People are going to be like, what? No one gets this. No one understands. You don't look at comic books to make the great comic book TV series. You look at other things, the way Kurosawa was an inspiration to George Lucas to do Star Wars. You want to make Friday Night Lights is one of the great... Friday Night Lights is the Star Trek of East Texas football. Just like the West Wing is the Star Trek of Washington, D.C. And Master and Commander is the Star Trek of the high seas back in the day, yo. I'm just saying, you want to make a great... I don't know, I'm digressing. The fact is this. In the world that we live in today, the creation of these characters becomes very lucrative. And if suddenly you want to change the narrative after people die, I say, fuck off. Fuck you. That's a bunch of bullshit. History already decided who created these characters. And Len Wein's contribution to comics is now being denigrated because he's not here anymore. I mean, Christine, his wife, is a lawyer. It sucks that Marvel, the MCU, is going to add Roy Thomas as a co-creator of Wolverine. I would say precedent takes place, and I have to go back and look, but has anyone on any movie that's ever been made, has any of the previous X-Men movies ever listed Roy Thomas as a creator? Was Roy Thomas in a fucking X-Men movie? I say no, he wasn't. Do you know who was? Len Wein. And he looked good as a senator. I mean, precedent there. Roy Thomas, you're in your 80s. That ship has sailed. Stop bogarting credit for somebody. You were editor-in-chief. You were not creating. You were editor-in-chief. You were shaping your creative people. You were doing what an editor does. It's already a bunch of bullshit, the work for hire thing, when creators aren't getting paid for their characters. Although Marvel, to be fair, has been pretty good about it. They've been going back and putting their creators' names and giving them money. And Jim Starlin being in a room with Captain fucking America. That was good shit. The creator of Vanth Dreadstar and the Metamorphosis Odyssey. Syzygy Darklock. Come on. The Lord High Papal. Fucking love Dreadstar. I know it's an aside. It's an epic comic, though. I mean, it was literally an epic comic. It was an epic story, but it was an epic comic. If you're a Marvel fan, you know what I mean. The fact is, Marvel should rectify this. If Roy Thomas's name does appear in the end credits of Deadpool and Wolverine, that is a travesty of justice. That is a changing of history that shouldn't happen. It's bullshit. I call them out. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not right. Anyway, an interesting tale. I thought it was something worth delving into. What do you guys think? Man, I'll tell you. This idea, people, everybody, and what do I always say? It's not what you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. But also, why do you try and claim credit when people who died that actually did the work aren't here to defend themselves? Seems like the worst. And I don't want to bag on some, guy that's elderly who's done a lot for the comic industry. I like Roy Thomas. I liked his comics. But it's BS that this is happening. BS. So let's jump in and see what you guys have to say. I don't know. Let's see. Here we go. 200 Watt Studio says, my prediction is, that was earlier. That's earlier. 1001 Johnny says, so we talking about Len Wein or John Romita Sr.? They've both passed, so this will be very interesting to hear about. Well, both of them co-created Wolverine. Eternitine Forever says, Jamal Igle, they get credit, not payment. Well, some of the time they do get payment. Brandon Clark says, dang, you word good as heck, yo. Happy birthday. Brandon Clark, I don't quite know what you mean by that, but yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. 1001 Johnny goes on to say, I feel the compulsion to say if Roy Thomas is credited on this film, I will not be giving the studio my money in the theaters or physical media. After watching Batman and Bill, I'd like to see films fail based on crediting the wrong people. Well, I think you're not wrong. 1001 Johnny, I think that, look, we live in a world like I've always said, this is a cutthroat, horrible business. And when it comes down to money, people are willing, if people aren't around anymore and if you can get some cash. But I would say this, Roy Thomas as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, you forfeit the ability or the right to get co-creator credits. You're the editor. By definition, your job is to work with your writers and your artists. You don't take credit for their work. You can shape their work, but as your job as editor-in-chief, you don't get to take co-creation credit. That's not your job. That's not what you're there to do. You're the editor-in-chief. Perry White never took credit for Clark Kent's newspaper stories. He might have helped shape them. Oh, wait, Perry White's not real. But you know what? If he was real, he wouldn't sit there and go, Clark Kent, every story he wrote, I might have edited. Like I said, Kirby McCauley doesn't take credit for Stephen King's work, or any of the great editors don't take credit for their author's work. They help. They obviously shape. They suggest, but they don't get co-creator credit. That's some fucking bullshit. And now we hear that on the credits of Deadpool and Wolverine, Roy Thomas is getting co-creation credit of the character Wolverine. That, my friends, is bullshit. And if you go by precedent, like if I produce a movie, I get single card producing credit in the main titles, whether the main titles come at the end of the film, as they do in White Devils, as they do in Agent Cody Banks, or the front of the movie, as they do in The Hills Run Red. I get single card credit. That's my precedent. That's what I've earned. That's what I negotiate. Now I don't have to negotiate it because it's on studio movies. But bam, I don't have to explain it. I just get it. Because you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And you do not, as editor-in-chief, get to bogart your creator's credit. You don't get to do that. And that's fucking bullshit, Marvel, MCU, Kevin Feige. You should know better. You worked on Marvel X-Men movies. Never did Roy Thomas try and claim co-creator credit over Wolverine. Not in 2000, not in 2002, not when they made fucking Last Stand, not in First Class, Days of Future Past, not in any of those things. Not in X-Men Origins Wolverine, not in The Wolverine, not in Logan, not in Apocalypse. Roy Thomas's name does not appear on those movies as co-creator, and you know better. You know better. Bad Marvel, bad MCU. Do not give Roy Thomas co-credit on co-creating Wolverine. He was editor-in-chief of Marvel. If anything, that's his credit. You can say Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics when John Romita Sr. and Herb Trimpe and Len Wein, and you can even give credit to the kid who wrote in on that contest that never got credit. But that's some fucking bullshit. And you know what? That's like when, God love him, when Norman Spinrad was directed to try and take co-credit for creating the Borg. No. And I'm loath to admit this, but Maurice Hurley created the Borg. And you know what? Since I brought up Star Trek, let's be honest. The Borg is one of the dumbest names for any alien race. Cyborg. You know, whether you're reading Martin Caidin's book that became the $6 Million Man, the Borg. We call them the Borg. I mean, they say a straight face. You know, I kept it, every time I watch Days of Future Past or I watch Q-Who, I expect somebody to be like, Riker's like really? These characters are called the Borg? From the English language word cyborg? I mean, for Christ's sake, when Diane Duane in her novels, My Enemy, My Ally, finally coined the phrase the Rihansu, they're not called the Romulans. They don't call themselves the Romulans. They're the Rihansu. I don't even know what I'm talking about now. I'm so off the rails. Anyway, I'm on a rant. I'm possessed. That's why you tune into this show. Because sometimes I go off the rails. But when I do, listen to what 1001 Johnny said. Do not give Roy Thomas co-creator credit over Wolverine. It's wrong. It's not right. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, this smells like Bob Kane stealing the Batman. Damn it, I love Roy's stuff. Conan, Avengers, All-Star Squadron, but this is awfully low. And by the way, I love Roy Thomas too. I read all of All-Star Squadron, the Baxter issues. I love Conan. Roy Thomas was a great comic creator, a great comic writer. He wrote all kinds of great characters. He just didn't co-create Wolverine. And he had an amazing legacy. Perhaps I did not lean into this. Come on, get those Conan omnibuses. Roy Thomas was a fantastic comic creator. He just didn't co-create Wolverine. Did not do it. Did not do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Just saying. 200 Watt Studio says, I met Len a few times at Dangerous Visions in Studio City. A soft-spoken, nice man. And this sucks. Len Wein was one of the nicest. He was also smart. He was a passionate creator. And his wife's great, too. They had a loving relationship. He left us way too soon. Jay says, happy birthday, RMB. Who do you think should play the next Wolverine? Will they ever get him closer to right? Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, Wolverine, of course, is like 5'3" or 5 feet tall. I think Taron Egerton is great, or Egerton. I think Harry Potter could be a great Wolverine. I do. How do you find somebody? You know who my favorite Wolverine would have been? Who I wanted, if you don't know him? Fred Ward. Fred Ward, who played Gus Grissom in The Right Stuff. He's a diminutive actor. Fred Ward. He was in my favorite Secret Admirer. I love that. He was in Remo Williams. Fred Ward, to me, would have been the greatest Wolverine. He would have been great. Super chat, Jay. So Jay, you said that. 200 Watt Studio says, this will tarnish Roy's legacy. Sounds like something Roy's loudmouth manager instigated. Look, if people feel they can make a buck, half of Hollywood is filled with this kind of BS. Happens all the time. There's nothing you can do about it. I hope it doesn't tarnish his legacy, and it probably did come from his manager. It's a bunch of bullshit. So many people want to take credit for these things, and I get it. That's why it's really important when you are negotiating anything in the creative profession that you do not ever realize, you do not ever get what you deserve, get what you negotiate. That's why it's most important to have a great lawyer, a great entertainment lawyer, great people. I don't trust managers and agents. Unless they're working only for you, which they're not. Agents and managers just want to make a quick deal. They want to make a quick buck and get some money in as fast as possible. A lawyer will work with you for a long time. They're going to try and help you build a career, which is important. 1001 Johnny says, boycott Roy Thomas. Let's see if we can make it happen. The guy's in his 80s, his mid-80s. I would say this. All he has to do is look, it's really hard when you're looking for money and you're going to get a payday and they're going to put you on a movie like Wolverine or Deadpool. I keep saying Wolverine, but Deadpool and Wolverine. Apparently, because Christine heard about this, it's a done deal. It's fucked up, and it's wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. I understand that people, they're going to err on the side of caution, but I think it's BS. I don't think it's right, and I think it's bullshit that it's on the movie because then the historical legacy is changed, and it takes it away from Len Wein, who deserves it, and he's not here to defend himself. Neither is John Romita Sr., neither is Herb Trimpe. And it sucks. It sucks that this shit happens. Not a fan. Not a fan of this BS. But what are you going to do? Bushin Ryu Cat says that my stream is out of sync. Is that true? I don't know if it is or not. How I don't know. Doesn't look like it's been out of sync. But I don't say. Although I'm looking at this, and no, it seems like it's in sync. I'm looking at what I'm broadcasting right now. Hello. Is it me you're looking for? No, it looks, I don't know. Who knows? I've had so many weird problems. Brian Erdy says, I've been rebuilding my comic collection. Mine was stolen 2 years ago, and I'm rediscovering the new Teen Titans, and it has been a delight. George Perez's art is sick. It's so good. Brian Erdy, it is so good, isn't it? Let's see. I think I'm Ronzilla. Oh my God. Ronzilla sends in a $100 super chat. I don't have any alcohol. I know it sounds like I probably do, but I don't. This is not moonshine, contrary to popular belief. These are actually jugs full of ice water. So, Ronzilla says, hi, Rob. During the 80s and 90s, I never had any doubts about a movie being a bad movie. I just watched the new Godzilla and Kong film, and I had doubts. I give it a C+. Should Hollywood step away from franchise films for a while? Thoughts? Ronzilla? This is you've now put me in a contemplative mood. Here's my problem. Even when Rennie Harlan took over the Die Hard franchise, it used to be that you had creators, like, for instance, you had creators that wanted to do things. Like James Cameron wanted to make an Aliens sequel. He went in to pitch Fox. And famously, I don't know if this is true, but it's a great apocryphal story. He was in a room, and I want to believe it happened just like this. He was in a room full of Fox executives, which has a whiteboard or a chalkboard or whatever, and he just wrote the word alien on the chalkboard, and here he's pitching. He puts an S at the end and draws 2 marks to make it a $sign. And that was his pitch, and Fox said yes. But you know what? James Cameron made Aliens his fucking life. He'd made Terminator. He was a hot commodity in town, a movie for $6 million that made a ton of money. One of the great Hollywood B movies, made a lot. And he got to make Aliens, which, let's face it, is one of the great sequels ever made. I mean, I think the greatest sequel ever made is probably Godfather 2. Some people could say that the Man with No Name trilogy, that the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, even though that's the third movie in the Man with No Name trilogy, one of the great sequels ever made. The Road Warrior, one of the great sequels ever made. Empire Strikes Back. Godfather 2, I'd say, is probably the best. But Aliens is right up there because Aliens did something really interesting. James Cameron didn't go and do another haunted house movie in space. Alien was one thing. James Cameron took a different paradigm, a different kind of a movie, a war film. And very smartly, he made Aliens a siege movie, a war movie, a Vietnam film. Came out the same year as Platoon. And that was a genius idea. And the problem is now studios are like, and look, part of the reason I'm excited about Alien Romulus is because I think Fede Alvarez is a real filmmaker. And I think that he wanted to do this. He had an idea the same way that Ryan Coogler had an idea to make Creed. Creed wasn't going to get made. No one's going, oh, we're going to make a movie about Adonis Creed. No, that was Ryan Coogler. That was somebody who loved a franchise that came in and had his own idea and gave us something. I know Critical and Drinker and I split off on this, but I loved Creed. I mean, I appreciate what Critical Drinker, his points are very cogent, but you had somebody that loved a franchise who came in the same way that Fede Alvarez has now done this twice. He did this with Evil Dead, and he did this with Alien Romulus. Now, I haven't seen Alien Romulus. I just assume that it's going to be something because he's a fan and he's also a great filmmaker and loves it. And he's earned his right. After Evil Dead and after, of course, Don't Breathe, a great original film, terrific stuff. Fede Alvarez comes and does an Alien Romulus. What I want from sequels is not studios going, well, what IP can we exploit, and then hire somebody random. Let's hire some TV director to make a Star Trek movie. God, man. Okay, let me just say it again. Paramount, Eric Jedrinson, who co-wrote Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning and Mission Impossible 8 with Chris McQuarrie, go back, fuck the Secret Hideout people. No more Bad Robot. Even though Bad Robot has a stake in the Mission Impossible films, they already have the people, okay? How many times have you tried to make Star Trek 4? No. No. Go get Chris McQuarrie to direct, and Chris McQuarrie and Eric Jedrinson will take his script, Star Trek The Beginning, that you own. I've shown it on this show. I'll read it to you aloud if you want. It was written in 2005. You already own it. It's about the Romulan War, and it's about new Starfleet recruits, and it's the beginning of a trilogy. Please, I know Chris McQuarrie's in the Tom Cruise business. Chris McQuarrie's made you a lot of money. Eric Jedrinson's written 2 Mission Impossible movies with Chris McQuarrie. Please, make the canonical sequel to Star Trek Enterprise. It is outside of this non-canonical drivel you've been making since 2009. Let them make Star Trek The Beginning. They can rewrite the script. McQuarrie directs. Get people like Captain Archer to come back. Make Tom Hanks, who's always wanted to be in a Star Trek movie, the fucking Admiral of Starfleet. You can tell a great story that's relevant. It's canonical. It's awesome. Get the Star Trek art department to come back. I don't even know why I'm going off on this. Anyway, I was answering Ron Silla's question. Look, the director of Godzilla X Kong, Adam Wingard, is a fan. And I love what he got to do. But what's really interesting is we're seeing the difference. I think, and this is an important lesson, Godzilla -1 minus color and Godzilla X Kong, a really important lesson there. And while I'm happy to see Godzilla X Kong making money, I think what you're asking, Ronzilla, is what kind of art do we want? And I would say in terms of a franchise, Godzilla is 70 years old now. 70 years old. What movie would you rather sit down and show somebody that's never seen a Godzilla movie before? Godzilla X Kong, where Godzilla is a guest star in his own movie, or Gojira -1? What would you rather show somebody? Michael Brocky says, I love Fast X enough for the whole world. I'm unashamed. Well, I appreciate your conviction. I do appreciate that. 200 Watt Studio says 2010, the year we made contact, was the best sequel. It's not the best sequel because they changed the book. It should have been that the Russians and the Americans team up to beat the Chinese to Europa. I do love 2010. I do. I think it's a great space adventure story. It's too dated. We drink whiskey from Kentucky. And by the way, you know what's the problem with 2010? It should be on 4K, and it's not. It's not. It's not. Why didn't Warner Brothers give us 2010 and Outland, movies made 3 years apart, in 4K? Because the people who work at Warner Brothers don't even know what those movies are. Except George Feltenstein does. Bring it on. Anyway, in a world, Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, it's like saying Robert Gottlieb co-created the story and characters in Jean Le Carré's, Ray Bradbury's, and Salman Rushdie's books. Yeah, you're right. It's exactly like that. Editors and great editors are involved, but they don't take creator credit. That is exactly correct, Stubble. Exactly correct. I have a letter I want to read. As all of you know, if you haven't, as you're a longtime watcher of this show, you know that I'm doing a fully immersive audio drama written by Road to Perdition writer Max Allan Collins. It is a great privilege to be working on this with him. And Max wrote me a letter. He really did. He wrote me a letter, and it was fascinating, the letter he wrote me. So have you all known, I've been watching, or you've been watching this, and you've been seeing the letters that I've been reading from Undead Sick all the way in Holland. Well, Max Collins, the guy, Max Allan Collins wrote Batman comics in the 80s. Max Allan Collins took over writing the Dick Tracy comic strip from Chester Gould, the man who created it. He even wrote the novelization for Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy movie. But Max wrote me a really interesting response to Undead Sick's letters about suspension of disbelief, or willful or willing suspension of disbelief. So for those of you who've been following this whole idea about suspension of disbelief in fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, Max Allan Collins, this comes from the writer of True Noir, the Nathan Heller casebooks, based on his own 19-novel series. Max Allan Collins has written in to weigh in on the idea of suspension of disbelief. And let me read what he has to say. The discussion about suspension of disbelief is one that you've handled very well, but there's one thing missing. The phrase has historically been, quote, the willing suspension of disbelief. It reflects the agreement, even the contract, between writer and reader, between filmmaker and audience, to accept the make-believe reality of a fictional story based upon not insulting the recipient's intelligence. Breaking the laws of physics come into play, but so does a character who acts out of character. The willing suspension of disbelief is somewhat fluid. For a lot of us, we can accept that Sergeant Rock, in practically every issue of Our Army at War, performed battlefield feats comparable to what Audie Murphy only occasionally did as America's most decorated soldier of World War II. In those issues, Sergeant Rock didn't do anything that wasn't possible. But if Mike Hammer, Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer, who characteristically either just executed the bad guy or gal at the end of a novel, or tricked that evildoer into killing themselves somehow, fails to behave in character as a one-man jury, our suspension of disbelief has been shattered, even without physics involved. This was the case in the terrible version of My Gun is Quick, when Mike Hammer just turned in the femme fatale to the cops. Superman can fly because he's from a planet whose gravity differs from ours. But he can't shapeshift because it isn't among the rules about the character as first presented, and judiciously revised over the years. Stan Lee had a lot of fun with applying real-world rules to the Fantastic Four, as when they early on got kicked out of their penthouse for not paying the rent, because being a superhero didn't pay for shit. It doesn't matter, at least not to a great extent, what the rules are. But readers, filmgoers, expect some rules and expect creators to stick by them. The most egregious offense is when a superhero suddenly has a power never before mentioned that is used to get out of a story-concluding peril. I think of Superman 2, when Superman takes the cellophane S off his chest and throws it at Zod, Ursa, and Nan. Modern Star Trek is filled with characters, beloved ones in some cases, acting wildly out of character. The hell you say? The rules of Buffy the Vampire Slayer are void in Star Trek, although the current writers don't seem to know that. Does anyone really believe that Captain Pike would entertain his friends on the crew, mostly subordinates, by playing genial amateur chef? Again, we willingly suspend disbelief when our intelligence isn't insulted. Our Nathan Heller immersive audio project plays by its own rules. We will get a historically accurate portrayal of a crime or mystery of the 20th century and be presented with a new theory as to what really happened. But we do so through the eyes of a fictional character, Nathan Heller. Part of the suspension of disbelief that allows Heller to report on things he's witnessed, although he never actually existed, is that on one hand he takes the place of one or more actual detectives in history who did witness these events, and he also has a backstory that includes parents, grandparents, etc., and he grieves when someone he loves is killed along the way. And he farts and fucks and everything else that we recognize as actual human existence. That's why characters like Nate Heller and Mike Hammer and Sam Spade and Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock seem real to us. Here's where fluidity comes into play, Sergeant Rock style. It's highly unlikely that any one detective would be involved in as many famous cases as Nathan Heller is, from the supposed attempted assassination of FDR to the Black Dahlia slang to Roswell and Amelia Earhart and so on. Way to drop histories or way to drop hints of the upcoming stories, Max. Some readers can't get past that. Most can because each novel is self-contained and readers understand and accept the premise. A tough private eye in the Philip Marlowe mode will examine and be involved in famous crimes. A late friend of mine, a wise one, used to say, if you buy any of it, you buy all of it. But the sale is only made when the contract implied by the willing suspension of disbelief is not violated. This is a valuable discussion to have, Rob. Max Allen Collins. Max, once again, your words prove why I want to be in business with you, my friend, because you are a consummate writer, a consummate imagination connoisseur, and a great producer. And a great novelist. And everybody, if you're interested in our, True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, immersive audio drama, Max Allen Collins has written 19 novels you can delve into, beginning with True Detective, the first book in the Frank Nitti trilogy. So, there you go. And on that note, everyone, I'm going to bring an end to this. Let me just check and make sure that I haven't missed anyone's input here. Brandon Clark, gotta be real. You is wording all kind of good. I ain't tripping for real. I always tell it like it be, and no cap how it be. Gotta get that 4K crow. Well, Brandon, I'm right there with you. I gotta get that 4K crow too. 1001 Johnny, he sent in a tip, but only part 1 and part 3. Concerning Godzilla x Kong, the campy tone is not because of Hollywood's lack of artistic interest. Yoshimitsu Banno, the man who gave us Godzilla's infamous flight ability, was the producer at Toho when the Western films were being made. Banno-san felt that Godzilla was a character that should be used to capture the imagination of children. It was that he pushed for Godzilla to be solely a guardian of nature, and thus sets the tone of the monster films. Well, that makes sense if you delve into like something like Godzilla GMK, All Out Monsters Attack, which is one of my favorite modern Godzilla films. Really interesting stuff. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, I'm going to get off this show. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this show and this channel. For those of you who are new members or old members, we will be having another members call next Saturday. They are all friends of ours and us. We all friends getting together, hanging out and chilling out. It's all fun. And I want to thank my moderators and everybody who supports this channel. Tom Jr. Jackson, who is a great moderator. I don't know anybody else who is here. I see Mikey Lito's in the chat. Mikey Lito, amazing guy. You should go to his channel. He's got a great channel. And everyone else. So thank you. I appreciate it. And this will be a very interesting thing to see how it all plays out in the long run, where this is all going. Yeah. And by the way, at 6 o'clock, head on over to Sixth Scale Mafia's channel. I will be over there. We're going to be talking some... We'll be talking Hot Toys. We'll be talking action figures. We'll be talking the artisan edition of the Jack Sparrow character that they showed us there was going to be one. Then they dropped it the next day, and it sold out instantly, and we can all bitch and moan and cry over the Hot Toys we're not going to get. And on that note, I will say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And again, tomorrow, if you're in Southern California, I will be at WonderCon. We are going to be doing our panel we've been doing for 22 years. And if you told me I'd be doing it 22 years later, I might not have done it 22 years ago. Starship Smackdown. My God, I've been doing Starship Smackdown for more than a third of my life. And I don't know what that says about me, but it's happened. So join us at WonderCon, and afterwards we can go to one of the two hotels, grab a drink. There's the Hilton and the Marriott. They're across from each other in Anaheim. It's going to be fun. Come on down. And I want to thank you all for being here. I don't know if this was out of sync or not. I hope it wasn't. I hope you can still understand what I'm saying. And with that, what can I say? Have a better day. And justice for Len.